when teachers cross the line.
It happens in all socioeconomic classes, all races, all religions, all education levels.
You've seen them in the headlines.
What kind of touching was it?
Now, after a year-long investigation by the NEWS4 I-Team, there are new protections in place to keep students safe from predators.
When I saw your report, it was like I was hit in the stomach.
What led to the changes, and what you can do now to protect your child this new school year.
The good news is that will not continue.
A NEWS4 I-Team special report, Slipping Through the Cracks. Here's investigative reporter Scott McFarland.
In just a few days, classrooms just like this one will be filled with students and teachers. Educators have a difficult job. The overwhelming majority of them are hardworking and honest. But there are some bad apples. In one nationwide survey, more than 3 million students reported sexual contact with an adult, commonly a teacher or coach. And a review of state disciplinary records in our area by the NEWS4 I-Team found dozens of teachers who canceled or had their licenses revoked in recent years. Some slipped through the cracks, keeping their licenses for years, even after admitting to misconduct. Over the next half hour, we're going to take you through a year-long investigation and show you how that happened, and show parents what they need to know to help keep their kids safe. It all began with one local teacher in one of America's largest school districts.
Inside Randallstown High School, Baltimore County, Brad Norton taught English. One morning in 2012, a 10th grade student said Norton sexually assaulted him inside the classroom. According to the police report, the 15-year-old said Norton touched him on the chest, beneath his shirt, then touched his penis. Arrested, booked, charged, Norton pleaded guilty to assault and a 4th-degree sex offense in court. The victim's father, whom we're not identifying, said the case had an enormous impact on their family.
Unfortunately, I think people naively assume that educators are there to protect our kids, and far too often we see they're not.
Jennifer Alvaro is a Maryland community activist who counsels sex offenders and has pushed for tougher background checks on educators.
Abuse is relentlessly democratic. It happens in all socioeconomic classes, all races, all religions, all neighborhoods, all education levels.
Thing is, this was no common case, and Brad Norton was no common teacher. He had a secret. Down the road in Virginia. In 2004, he was teaching English here, Hayfield Secondary, Fairfax County Public Schools, but only briefly, because in 2004, he was arrested.
And we found the details are strikingly similar. According to school district records, Norton was accused of rubbing his hands over a student's penis and touching the boy's buttocks while in his classroom. Arrested, booked, charged, Fairfax County Schools allowed Norton to resign. He pleaded guilty to assault, avoided jail time, but was ordered not to work again in a job in which he'd interact with children. In this document obtained by the NEWS4 I-Team, Fairfax County Public Schools formally notified Norton it would recommend the state education department revoke his teaching license. Doing so would help red flag Norton nationwide in a database called NASDAQ. His license revoked, he'd be unable to work at public schools, not just in Virginia, but other states too. Yet Norton managed to get that teaching job years later in Baltimore County. How? David Foster is former president of the Virginia State Board of Education, which votes to revoke licenses.
Something went wrong for this to happen because the whole system is designed to prevent this happening.
The I-Team found answers inside internal school district memos and emails, which show Fairfax County Public Schools failed to follow through. Failed to send the necessary paperwork to suspend Norton's license to the State Department of Education in Richmond, the agency charged with formally revoking the licenses. The State Department of Education even sent this reminder letter and a handwritten note in March 2005, which said no action, no license revocation can occur until Fairfax sends over the necessary paperwork.
The state has to get notification from the school district.
Correct.
The state says it received no written response. So Norton's license remained intact, and he was not red flagged, not immediately disqualified before he applied for the job in Baltimore County. After Norton's arrest in Baltimore County in 2012, that school district called Fairfax with questions about their former teacher. Shortly after, a Fairfax County schools administrator wrote this email obtained by the I-Team to the Virginia Department of Education asking, "Can you advise if you have any record of a license cancellation for Bradley Jefferson Norton? It is not listed on the agency website." A state administrator wrote back, "No, it was not received, and it would need to be submitted to us by the school division," meaning by Fairfax County Schools.
I'll entertain a motion to revoke the license of Bradley Jefferson Norton. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Not until 2013, 9 years after his arrest there, did Fairfax Schools finally submit the necessary paperwork to the state board to revoke Brad Norton's teaching license. Fairfax County Public Schools declined to answer questions about why Brad Norton slipped through the cracks, instead sending us a statement that, for legal reasons, it can't comment on specific personnel matters and that it's since changed the process it uses for teacher license revocations and now files all of the necessary paperwork to revoke a license in an expedited manner. For weeks, we tried to talk to Brad Norton, but no one answered the door inside his Washington, D.C. home. By phone, he declined to comment. Jennifer Alvaro says she worries his case won't be the last of its kind.
Local communities, you're arguing, sometimes drop the ball.
Frequently drop the ball.
Just don't do what they're supposed to do.
Correct.
After our first report aired, a Fairfax County School Board member asked for a formal review of school license revocations to ensure no other license had fallen through the cracks. The school district told us in a written statement it was unaware of any other similar cases. And 2 weeks after our story, the county's outgoing superintendent, Karen Garza, told reporter David Culver the handling of the Brad Norton case, which happened before her tenure, was unacceptable.
My goodness, absolutely not. And in fact, since I've been here, the minute we have any kind of challenge with any of our employees, which thankfully is very rare, we have great employees, but occasionally we'll have a situation, we hold them accountable and we turn them over to the VDOE to have their license revoked.
How confident are you that no one else has fallen through the cracks?
I'm very confident.
But it turns out she was wrong. As the I-Team kept digging, we found other teachers who admitted to sexual misconduct with students in Fairfax County, yet kept their licenses for years.
To protect his daughter's identity, Richard asked we not show his face.
I feel there's an institutional pattern to sweep it under the table.
His daughter went to West Potomac High in 2005 and reported to school officials her teacher touched her inappropriately, groping her buttocks 10 times. 2 of her classmates accused the teacher too.
She had the least of the problems with the guy. Her friends got it worse.
A school district memo obtained by the NEWS4 I-Team called the behavior grossly unprofessional. The teacher was charged with assault and fired. Yet the I-Team found Fairfax schools failed to send in the paperwork to Virginia state officials as required to revoke the man's teaching license until 2012, 7 years later. Richard told us he thinks he knows why.
Their image, to keep it out of the news.
You don't think it might have been just an accident or an oversight?
No, they're avoiding transparency.
Not only did we find Richard's case, though, the NEWS4 I-Team found 2 more cases, 2 more Fairfax teachers who slipped through the cracks. What's more, we found the school district knew about them and didn't tell us the full story.
It took them almost 5 years to provide the paperwork needed to cancel the license of an Annandale teacher who pleaded guilty to contributing to the delinquency of a minor. And then there's the case of another West Potomac High teacher charged with indecent exposure outside a local mall in 2004. Investigators said they found he had inappropriate photos of his female students, of their breasts and buttocks. 12 years after his arrest, his case was found languishing.
It's problematic if any school division has that situation.
And it wasn't found by Fairfax schools, but by Nancy Walsh, an investigator with the Virginia Department of Education in Richmond, who spotted the case while pulling records for our I-Team report.
Is it problematic if licenses are let languishing for 6, 7 years before they're revoked?
Definitely. If there is a basis for action against a license and any time passes before the action is taken, that whole interim period is troubling.
We wanted to know why these mistakes were being made over the past decade and asked Fairfax schools to talk to their current superintendent. Instead, they provided us a human resources official.
Do we know why it took years?
I've been here since January. I can't speak a lot to the previous practices. What I can tell you is about 2013, FCPS took a hard look at our processes, and from that point forward, we've been proactive in gathering the information on our end and then sending that to VDOE so they can make those decisions.
Chase Ramey couldn't tell us what happened in 2013 to cause the change.
We're again going through our records again to make sure that we are aware and that we provided all the appropriate information on all those cases. No, we do not believe there's any more of those cases in FCPS.
Would you be surprised if there were more out there we don't know about yet?
Oh, I expect it.
We continue to check every license revocation in the county to find out if Richard is right. If you know of a case we should be looking into, call our tip line at 202-885-4444 or email us at tips@news4iteam.com.
Why is it so difficult to check a teacher's past? parents or students can't easily find out why some lost their license.
Does it surprise you that his teaching license was just canceled?
It surprises me that it took so long.
Just ahead, how Maryland and Virginia are changing the critical information provided to the public. Welcome back to a News4 I-Team special report, Slipping Through the Cracks. Once again, here's Scott McFarlane.
When local school teachers are arrested or accused of sexual misconduct with students, it often makes headlines, as you're about to see with the next case the News4 I-Team looked into. But what happens to those teachers or their licenses when the cases end? Unlike many other states, it can be almost impossible for the media, parents, or students in our area to find out.
Months after winning a not guilty verdict in court.
When that judge read the verdict of not guilty of both charges, I felt like the world was off my shoulders.
Fairfax County Elementary School gym teacher Sean Lanigan went on TV to tell his side. Lanigan and his wife told a national audience they were shocked when a 6th grader from Center Ridge Elementary accused him of inappropriately touching her.
Of grabbing her boob and her rear end.
And that she made up the story, something a jury had agreed with. After his acquittal, Lanigan began teaching phys ed elsewhere in Fairfax County, at South Lakes High in Reston.
But 7 years after the trial and the not guilty verdict, there is trouble again for the popular phys ed teacher, according to an internal investigation by Fairfax County Public Schools, which was obtained by the I-Team.
In this 2015 report, internal school investigators looked into reports inside South Lakes High that Lanigan had run his finger up the inner thigh of a 15-year-old sophomore, that he was seen by colleagues holding hands with girls, talking to one about a vibrator, calling another his girlfriend, tripping a student, using inappropriate language, and talking to boys about a girl's body parts. The school district memo says Lanigan denied these accusations, but says fellow students or teachers corroborated them. It also says Lanigan admitted allowing students to access confidential files in his computer. According to state records, in July 2016, Lanigan quit. Earlier this year, he formally completed the process of canceling his teaching license with the state, acknowledging he did so in response to Fairfax County's petition to revoke it, based on the findings of the school district investigation. But he did not admit to the allegations.
Does it surprise you that his teaching license was just canceled?
It surprises me that it took so long.
This former student, who asked we call her Sarah, says she first complained about Lanigan back in the 1990s when he was her gym teacher.
What kind of touching was it?
It was mostly in my shoulders or my arms or like huggy.
She says Lanigan made sexual comments.
On your birthday? What did he say to you?
That I should run the mile in my birthday suit.
In phys ed class?
In phys ed class.
In a Washington Post article 5 years ago, Lanigan responded to that same accusation by saying he was joking that the girl had come to class without her gym uniform. Sarah says her mother filed a formal complaint and pulled the girl from Lanigan's class.
It was something that was happening to all the girls.
As a man, I'm glad he doesn't have a teaching license anymore.
Ray Murrow, Fairfax County's top prosecutor, says law enforcement was notified of the new accusations against Lanigan in 2015 inside South Lakes High, but that the families involved did not pursue criminal charges.
We knew that there were some incidents over there. I don't know if we had all the specifics, but I know the police were in touch with some of the families.
Lanigan declined our request for an interview and instead issued a written statement, which said, in part, "I have 18 years of experience teaching, and I have never inappropriately touched a student. However, after the trial, when I returned to teaching, tension remained between the school system and me, and after 5 years, although I still enjoyed teaching, I decided to move on with my life and surrendered my teaching license." The files detailing what he was accused of in 2015 are kept private in Fairfax County, and only by requesting his records through state officials via the Freedom of Information Act did we learn about the new accusations.
I mean, he was very playful. Yeah.
How so?
Like he would always go up to girls, tickle them, or pick them up, swing them around.
Even the young girl who faced off with Lanigan at trial in court, who's now 19 years old, says she never knew what happened to Lanigan after his acquittal.
Nobody told you he was teaching again?
No.
Nobody told you he was back in front of kids?
No.
Lanigan provided a written statement to News 4 about his 2010 trial, and the woman who talked to us saying there was absolutely no truth to it, and that the girl making the accusations had the opportunity to testify, and her testimony was found not at all credible. In fact, the jury took only 47 minutes to come back with their unanimous verdict of not guilty. So why didn't any of his former students know he canceled his teaching license? We wanted to know, and discovered Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. trail many other states in what they tell the public about teachers.
None of the three post the reasons or the orders describing the allegations that caused a teacher license revocation like many other states do, including South Carolina, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. No way for parents or colleagues to know why a former teacher got pulled. No way to guide if they should talk to their children about whether they were victimized too. D.C. posts no information about licenses pulled we found. Virginia and Maryland post only the names and the dates.
But as you're about to see, that was going to change quickly.
Calls for change after our News 4 I-Team investigation.
If there are teachers who may have committed some type of offense, we all need to know it.
When we return, the information available to you right now to better protect your kids.
How could a Virginia teacher admit to assaulting a student, lose his job, but keep his license for years? Our News 4 I-Team investigation found the local school district dropped the ball in his case, neglecting to send the proper paperwork to the state until years later. But top state officials saw a report, took immediate action to help keep it from happening again.
Amid our News 4 I-Team investigation, Virginia's legislature debated a bill to prevent future mistakes like the one we'd uncovered. Under the old system, school districts didn't have to report alleged misconduct to the state until the teacher was convicted in court, sometimes years later. The new bill would require districts notify state investigators within 10 days of any suspected activity.
There was a recent investigation by NBC4 in my area where they discovered that there were 4 teachers who had actually admitted to sexual misconduct with our students whose licenses weren't revoked.
The bill passed quickly, and Governor Terry McAuliffe signed it into law. It took effect July 1st.
If someone's license needs to be suspended or taken away, other jurisdictions ought to know that we have done that so people aren't moving around.
The governor says the Virginia Department of Education has long had experts on its team to help chase down and help revoke the licenses of teachers who sexually assault students. And he says what the I-Team found in Fairfax, the failure to ensure licenses of bad apples were revoked, was unacceptable.
For whatever reason they decided not to let us know, the good news is that will not continue. We have investigators. And all of us want to make sure our children are safe. And if there are teachers who may have committed some type of offense, we all need to know it.
That's not all that changed in Virginia. The state also approved a budget boost for the Department of Education to help them hire another investigator to chase down future cases of misconduct. In Maryland, state officials made a different change because of our reporting.
For years, the state kept information about revoked licenses hidden from the public. But now Maryland State Superintendent of Schools requires the posting online of teachers who had their licenses stripped, including when and why.
How do you know your child is being abused by a teacher?
Our son actually called us and finally told us what was happening.
When we come back, a local mother talks about the red flags that were there and what parents should be looking for.
It can be a tough talk to have with your child. How do you as a parent know something might be wrong involving a teacher? The mother you're about to meet has a warning for you. Signs she wishes she had picked up on sooner.
You can definitely see that there's a guard and there's a level of being careful that's there about trusting other people.
5 years have passed, but this Montgomery County mother says her teenager is still dealing with the aftermath of being sexually assaulted by a school instructor. We're not showing you her face to protect her child's identity.
All of his grades had fallen significantly. He was irritable. He was crabby. He was distant. He was spending more time in his room.
She was surprised to find out the inappropriate touching had been happening for months inside Northwood High School.
Our son actually called us and finally told us what was happening.
That open line of communication between a child and parent is crucial, says James Hitchner, who heads the health curriculum at Frederick County Public Schools.
If it's something you're not comfortable with, please tell someone.
He says that dialogue needs to start happening at an early age, as young as 4.
Even back in the kindergarten curriculum, we inject very early on the definition of private parts. And we don't go into any depth or detail. We just simply remind students that private parts are those parts that are covered by a bathing suit. And the idea that those parts are not to be touched by anyone that's in a non-clinical setting or from an adult or a parent that is not helping you with some type of healthful situation.
Hitchner says those conversations must continue as the child grows, arming them with knowledge about what kind of attention from an adult is appropriate versus inappropriate.
Are they touching you because they're helping you with a physical ailment that you have? Are they touching you because they're giving you personal care?
And empowering kids to follow their instincts and say no to any unwanted touch and to tell someone even if the adult says it's secret.
The bottom line is to be able to tell that trusted adult, I'm not comfortable with this. As a young adolescent, I'm saying no to this. It's not appropriate. I know it's not appropriate. I may need your help getting out of this.
Experts say get involved with your child's activities at school and know the adults they're interacting with on a daily basis. There's much more advice for parents on our website on how to talk to your children about preventing sexual abuse and how to approach your child if you suspect something might have happened. Visit NBCWashington.com and click on Investigations. And the News 4 I-Team wants to hear from you. If something's happening at your child's school we should be looking into, there are many ways to reach us. Call our tip line at 202-885-4444, email us at tips@news4iteam.com, or simply go to our website. We hope this special report helps you start those conversations with your child to keep them safe. For the entire News 4 I-Team, thanks for watching.
A local child protective service agency drops the ball, mishandling the case of a teacher accused of sexually abusing a student. The mistake allowed the teacher back into a local classroom for years. An investigation by Scott McFarlane and our News 4 I-Team reveals the error and a loophole in local law that experts say could put more children at risk. Scott?
Yeah, Doreen, good evening. The teacher has denied these accusations from the start. It was never criminally charged, but Child Protective Service officials say he should not have been allowed back in the classroom. Yet that's where he ended up, almost immediately.
Zevlin Staten wasn't just a teacher, but an assistant principal in Arlington Public Schools, until Staten's name surfaced in a he said, she said case. In 2013, a former student told investigators that in 2006, when she was in 3rd grade, Staten forced her to engage in oral sex in the closet of his classroom at Claremont Elementary, and then again when she was in 4th and 5th grade. Police investigated but never filed charges, citing lack of evidence. Staten was put on leave, then he resigned, and to this day he denies the accusations. But in September 2013, Arlington County Child Protective Services found Staten engaged in a Level 1 sex offense, finding there was clear and convincing evidence the abuse happened. Immediately putting him on a state child abuse and neglect registry, which isn't public but disqualifies him from teaching again.
When it says a Level 1 sexual offense, that's a significant sexual offense?
Yes, this is a serious situation that needs to be addressed in the most controlled way possible.
Child abuse counselor Ileana Gill of Virginia says Staten's teaching career should have ended there.
My opinion would be that that would disqualify that person from ever having contact with children again. That's a very serious situation.
But an investigation by the News 4 I-Team reveals Staten's teaching career never even slowed. The same month he was found to have engaged in misconduct by Arlington Child Protective agents, Staten started a new assistant principal job at Thomas Johnson Middle School in Prince George's County. How did he slip through the cracks and into a classroom again? Staten appealed his case to State Social Services in Richmond. That allowed his name to be pulled from the child abuse registry, which would have flagged other schools from hiring him, including Prince George's County, where he'd go on to work for more than 3 years.
I feel betrayed.
With hundreds of students, including Dwight Francis's daughter.
It gives me a feeling in my stomach as if, do I need to talk to my child in a certain type of way to try and find out if anything may or may not have happened.
In 2015, while he worked in Maryland, his case was heard by state officials in Virginia who sustained the finding he'd engaged in sexual misconduct. Under Virginia state law, his license should have been pulled and his name added back to the registry.
But state education records obtained by the I-Team show that didn't happen. Arlington County Human Services failed to notify the public schools what they'd found, that a former teacher had engaged in a major sex offense, even though Arlington County Human Services works just across the hall from Arlington Public Schools.
The agency also failed to notify the state education department to pull Staten's teaching license. Charles Pyle of the Virginia Department of Education didn't speak about Staten's case, but said such a mistake by Child Protective Services is a violation of state law.
If one agency, doesn't carry out that responsibility, there's the potential of a window being opened, a window for an individual to move to another state and secure a license in another state, or just move to another district here in Virginia.
Arlington County Child Protective Services declined multiple requests for an interview and said it couldn't answer specific questions about the case. But in a written statement said the county will look into and address any report that a required notification was not received, and also ensure that its protocols are updated. Staten finally quit his Maryland teaching job in January 2017 and lost his Virginia teaching license in May 2017, but only after Arlington Public Schools decided to check back on whatever happened to him, and after discovering he'd been found to have engaged in a sex offense and had been teaching all the while in Maryland.
Allowing someone to continue to work and have access to other children is just a very egregious situation because we have the safety of children to consider.
Zevelyn Staten declined to be interviewed and quit Thomas Johnson Middle in Lanham, Maryland in January. Coming up tonight at 11, more on our investigation, including how parents at that Maryland school say they found out about this man's past and what the school principal did just today because of our report, Doreen and Wendy.
Wow. And just to clarify, in 2013, when he filed for an appeal, he didn't win that appeal, and yet his name was still not published.
So the loophole is you're off the child abuse registry and your license stays intact while you appeal, not if you win the appeal. He ended up losing it, yet because of the mistake that was made.
Like 2 years later he lost it,
2 years later he lost it, but again, kept the license because the mistake followed the loophole.
So hard for children to report these things. They have to go through the process of interviewing with police and all of that.
Which is tough.
Much worse when they do report it and nothing happens.
And when these things take years, the children have to be ready to participate in the process for years.
Tonight, a News 4 I-Team investigation reveals how a series of failures allowed a teacher accused of sexually abusing a student to return to the classroom.
As investigative reporter Scott McFarland discovered, one man's case reveals potential problems in 2 states.
Zevelyn Staten has denied the accusations from the start. Police dropped their investigation into him, and he was never charged with a crime. But in 2013, Arlington County Child Protective Services found Staten engaged in a Level 1 sex offense with one of his students. Abuse counselor Ileana Gill says that should have prevented Staten from ever going back into a classroom.
Level 1 means the most serious types of activities that you can do with children, and to me it suggests high risk.
A former 3rd grade student of Staten's at Claremont Elementary accused him of forcing her to engage in oral sex in a classroom closet years earlier. Staten quit his job during the investigation, yet he immediately found work here, Thomas Johnson Middle School in Lanham, Maryland, where he taught for more than 3 years. Dwight Francis's daughter was one of Staten's students.
Was hiring him a failure by Prince George's County Public Schools?
Absolutely a failure.
Anybody with that kind of background needs to be pulled out.
Yes, absolutely.
A News 4 I-Team investigation found Staten's case revealed a possible series of errors. Arlington Child Protective Services failed to notify the school district that they'd found Staten engaged in sexual misconduct, and they failed to notify the state to revoke his teaching license, as required under state law.
Allowing someone to continue to work and have access to other children is just a very egregious situation because we have the safety of children to consider.
Staten's Virginia teaching license wasn't revoked until May of this year. Arlington Child Protective Services said it can't answer our questions about why a mistake was made or about a specific case. But parents at Thomas Johnson Middle have a different question. Why weren't they told when Prince George's schools learned about Staten's past?
Do parents know what he was accused of doing?
No, until I was contacted by you all. We didn't receive a letter or a robocall, anything like that.
Staten quit his job at Thomas Johnson in January 2017. Parents say they were never told why, which raises a risk, experts say.
If I'm a parent in a school where someone has been found to have a sexual abuse background, I need to know that so that I can have a conversation with my child.
Prince George's County schools say they complete state and FBI background checks on all employees and follow up with phone calls for employees who'd worked in other school districts. Sources inside Prince George's County Public Schools say they did call Arlington schools to ask about Zevlin Staten and were told there were no problems with him. Arlington schools say they don't keep records of reference check phone calls.
Just today, Prince George's schools formally notified parents at Thomas Johnson Middle School about this case, telling parents to contact authorities if they have concerns. Zevlin Staten's attorney says his client has denied the allegations against him to this day. He was not prosecuted. Maryland, meantime, is reviewing whether to revoke Staten's Maryland teaching license. Scott McFarland, News 4 IT.
You know, parents trust teachers with their children, but a dangerous few of those teachers abuse that trust. Tonight, a News 4 I-Team investigation raises the question, is the D.C. government doing enough to prevent predators from slipping through the cracks and back into classrooms? Tonight, the I-Team is working for you to get some answers.
They found the D.C. government isn't raising red flags to warn schools across the nation when a teacher admits to abusing a child. Investigative reporter Scott McFarland joins us now with the latest in his continuing series. Very disturbing, Scott.
For 2 years, the I-Team has investigated sex abusers in Virginia and Maryland who we found slipped through the cracks and landed new teaching jobs. We've also been looking into D.C. schools to determine if there were problems there, too. And what we discovered surprised us, and it alarmed safety experts. D.C. doesn't even have a system for revoking teaching licenses, even from those who admit to crime.
Giovanni Pena was once Teacher of the Year at Oyster Adams School in D.C., the most popular with kids, parents say. Now, he's a felon, just released from prison.
Even talking about it just makes me sad.
He taught Dion Bell's son in 4th grade before admitting sexually abusing a different student.
The first talk is about, did this happen to you? And that talk is a very scary talk.
Pena pleaded guilty 2 years ago this month.
The whole community just, everybody was in mourning, basically.
In most cases like this, a teacher like Pena would be formally listed on a national database called NASDAQ. That list formally red flags 78,000 teachers nationwide, many of whom engaged in misconduct, flagging them to education officials in every state in the nation to ensure they can't cross state lines and try to get new teaching licenses and access to kids again. But the News 4 I-Team found Pena isn't on the list, and we found other names missing too. John Solano, who pleaded guilty and was imprisoned in 2013 for sex misconduct at McKinley Tech. And Charles Young, who last year pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting students at Dunbar High. Pena, Solano, and Young all share one thing in common. They taught in D.C.
And if they lost their certificate, they are to be in our system.
Phil Rogers runs the national database of teacher license revocations.
It would be very strange that there were no teachers in D.C. who had misconduct that resulted in them losing their certificate.
Seems almost impossible.
Yes.
But our investigation reveals since 2008, the D.C. Office of State Superintendent of Education, which oversees teacher licenses in the district, has revoked 0 teacher licenses for misconduct and added 0 of their names to the national database.
Since the teacher did go to jail, the teacher was publicly humiliated, but that's not enough. The teacher should not be allowed to teach ever again.
Other states, including Virginia and Maryland, approved regulations allowing them to revoke teacher licenses years or decades ago. In D.C., the regulations to do so are not yet final. The D.C. Office of State Superintendent of Education allowed Pena, Solano, and Young's licenses to simply expire, no red flag raised to other states and other schools.
We want highly qualified, effective teachers in front of every student every day, and there may be cases where that's not happening.
D.C. State Board of Ed member Joe Whedon says that leaves kids vulnerable in and outside of D.C.
We're putting someone else's child at risk of being put in a situation where they shouldn't be.
Somebody over the district line in Maryland or Virginia.
Exactly.
Safety experts say the problem goes deeper than just public schools. Unlike in almost every other state in the nation, in D.C., charter school teachers are not required to have a license, which means there's no license to revoke. No formal way to warn the nation if a teacher is accused of abuse in D.C.'s growing charter school system.
Including the case of Alan Coleman, arrested last year when a former student came forward and accused him of sexually abusing her at the KIPP D.C. Key Academy back in 2004. Coleman has pleaded not guilty.
We've got to have ways to make sure that there are red flags when they need to be there.
Child abuse therapist Ileana Gill says allowing charter schools to hire teachers without licensure puts kids at risk.
Everybody has to participate. I mean, it takes a village. I mean, we really do as a community have to all be participating in whatever small or large way we can to make sure that kids are safe.
The school board overseeing D.C. charter schools says it does not require licenses so as to give schools more flexibility in how they hire, but says it requires background checks on any candidate. But the I-team found background checks sometimes fail. According to a police report, the administrator of KIPP Academy suspected Coleman had an inappropriate relationship with the student in 2004, asked him to stand down, and didn't renew his contract. We contacted KIPP Academy about that report, and they told us at the time if there was evidence of the misconduct Mr. Coleman was later charged with, we would have immediately alerted the appropriate authorities, and that the inappropriate relationship referenced in the report was professional in nature. Months later, Coleman was able to get a new job with nearby Capital City Charter School. In this letter to parents, Capital City says it ran a background check on Coleman and that it came back clean. They sent that letter last year after police arrested Coleman for the alleged 2004 misconduct.
Without the constraints of the licensure requirements, that they're able to do things a little bit differently. Whether or not that outweighs the risk is a question that I certainly have, but the law is the law.
We checked and found Alan Coleman was able to get another teaching job in Florida. A school spokesperson there tells the I-team he was terminated last summer. We tried reaching out to all the teachers in this report. We did not hear back. We did hear from D.C.'s Office of State Superintendent, which says it hopes to have these revocation policies finalized in the district by 2018 or 2019. On and Leo.
I still can't get over how useless the background check is. What good is it if it doesn't have the information in it about why these teachers are being moved around or being fired?
That's true outside D.C. as well. In Maryland and Virginia, we've found occasions where background checks simply fail. It's a phrase that doesn't have a whole lot of definitive meaning.
Too bad. And the impact is far-reaching. Scott McFarland, thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott.
Tonight, major questions about whether a local school district dropped the ball, possibly putting other children at risk.
The school fired a teacher suspected of sexually abusing a girl, but an investigation by the NEWS4 I-team reveals it's what they did not do next that raised concerns. Here's investigative reporter Scott McFarland.
Did the Florida school know about your history in D.C.?
Alan Coleman is headed to prison. Question is, should he have been sent there much sooner? For 10 years, Coleman worked as a social studies teacher at Northwest D.C.'s Capital City Public Charter School. But in March 2015, his career there ended in an instant. Because this history teacher had a history. Capital City Public Charter fired Coleman after learning he was suspected of sexually abusing a former student from a different school for years. Though Coleman lost his job, his life remained surprisingly the same. Months later, he found a new teaching job here, Eastside High School, Gainesville, Florida. The NEWS4 I-team obtained his job application and found these endorsements from his Capital City Public Charter colleagues. School leaders in Florida tell the I-team they did a reference check with the former principal at Capital City Charter.
We were told that this was an employee who was an excellent teacher who brought a lot of positives to his school.
It wasn't until more than a year later, D.C. police came calling on Coleman to investigate those abuse allegations, leading us to wonder how he slipped through the cracks. School, police, and court records compiled by the I-Team reveal the timeline of events. Take a look at this. According to a police report, Coleman's contract at another charter school, KIPP Academy, was not renewed in 2004 after the administrator there suspected him of having an inappropriate relationship with a student. When contacted by the I-Team, the school said had there been any evidence of misconduct, it would have called the authorities. In February 2015, Coleman was in his 10th year teaching at Capital City Charter when the school learned about the earlier abuse allegations involving Coleman and put him on leave immediately and fired him within days. D.C. police say they weren't notified about Coleman's crime until April 2016, and not by Capital City, but by the victim herself. They arrested and charged Coleman with child sex abuse weeks later. But Capital City didn't notify its school community, its parents, about Coleman's case until May 2016, 14 months after it fired Coleman. The school sent this letter to parents saying, "We've been cooperating with the appropriate district officials and were asked to keep the matter confidential so as not to jeopardize their investigation." Months after that letter, D.C. police began investigating the school itself for failure to report a suspected sex offense. The D.C. Office of Attorney General says it's deliberating whether to file criminal charges against Capital City.
We asked officials with the Capital City Charter School to go on camera and explain their side of the story. They would not.
So we submitted written questions, which they declined to answer, instead issuing a statement saying, "We're confident that we discharged our responsibilities properly in this matter. We've cooperated with law enforcement in all phases of its investigation."
Everybody has to participate. I mean, it takes a village.
Child abuse therapist Ileana Gill says school districts are required by law to pass along suspicions of abuse. D.C. police wouldn't discuss their investigation of Capital City Charter School, but said D.C. law requires not only school leaders, but all adults to report suspected sex abuse to police.
In essence, it ensures the safety and well-being of all children here in the district.
Whether you're a school or just a citizen.
Correct.
Wanted to see if you'd like to give us any kind of response to your case.
Coleman pleaded guilty to child sex abuse in late October. He wouldn't answer our questions about his crime or how his former school responded. Scott McFarland, News 4 IT.
Just the students.
Educators in every local school district must pass a background check before they get the job, but not all of them are licensed by the state. An investigation by Scott McFarland and the News 4 I-Team reveals hundreds of those staffers have no license and much less to lose if they break the rules.
When the bell rings on the first day of school, the kids meet their new instructors.
You all liked him.
We did. We liked him and we trusted him and we thought that he cared about our son.
This mom's teenager took a theater class at Northwood High in Silver Spring in 2012 with Aaron Lemire. We're not showing her face to protect her son's identity.
This is a guy who saw kids regularly.
All day.
At nights and weekends, too.
Holidays.
She says Lemire became close with her teen, then took advantage.
And it happened somewhere on the school grounds.
It happened behind the theater stage, in a room that you can take the child into and you can lock and shut the door.
Lemire eventually pleaded guilty to a sex offense and indecent exposure.
I'm Scott with Channel 4.
He would not speak with the I-Team about his case.
It's a horrible thing to look at your child and see the amount of fear in their face.
He still has that.
Yes, he does.
Thing is, Lemire wasn't a teacher. He was not licensed to teach by the Maryland State Department of Education. He was a media technician who helped run the theater program. And a News 4 I-Team investigation finds he's one of a rising number of unlicensed education professionals locally accused of assaulting students.
All local schools require background checks on their employees to ensure our kids are safer and require a state license, too, but only for teachers, administrators, counselors, and psychologists. Not for security guards, technicians, some aides, or even coaches. According to child safety advocate Jennifer Alvaro, the unlicensed have less to lose if they break the rules.
They're not licensed. They leave the school, and no one's the wiser.
No formal red flag.
No formal red flag. And that's extraordinarily dangerous.
In recent months, local police have arrested a series of unlicensed educators in our area, including Carlos Bell, a Charles County Schools instructional aide who's pleaded not guilty to charges of sexually abusing at least 24 students. And Deontay Caraway, a former elementary school aide in Prince George's County, who's pleaded guilty to federal charges of sexually assaulting elementary school kids to create child porn.
Are they able to groom a kid as well as a licensed teacher who sees the kid, 50 minutes a day every day?
They're often more times better able to groom kids.
Because Alvaro says they may have more access to the students outside the classroom.
Those people are often alone more one-on-one, often have more intimate relationships with kids because they're helping kids who have been acting out or talking to kids about why they were acting out.
And 2 times this spring, police arrested Montgomery County Public School security guards for sexual improprieties with students. The I-Team found neither Virginia nor Maryland state law requires school security guards get licenses. Only Prince George's County, which uses special licensed police in its buildings, does so.
Told you so. Told you so.
That's why the mom of the Northwood High teen says she's been advocating local schools consider more licensing and more oversight of the adults they place with our children.
They are implementing systems to have better systems to watch over these volunteers or these paraeducators that come onto a campus, but it is nowhere near where it needs to be.
The I-Team reviewed hundreds of job openings in 3 major local school districts and found nearly a third of the jobs require no state licensure. That includes Montgomery County Public Schools. That's the one that told us licensure is just one tool to protect kids, that they also use background checks. And they said, quote, MCPS will continue to review all tactics and strategies to ensure the safety of our students in the school buildings and in school facilities. Aaron and Doreen, this is an ongoing concern for all school districts.
The NEWS4 I-Team uncovered a mistake by an agency we trust for the safety of our children. A Virginia teacher investigated by Child Protective Services was found to have sexually abused a student and then found a new job in a Maryland school.
And now there are calls for action, including new safety rules and a deeper investigation into whether similar mistakes have been made.
Scott McFarland continues his investigation of teachers who are slipping through the cracks.
Zevlin Staten spent more than a decade teaching at Arlington Public Schools until a former 3rd grader accused him of forcing her to engage in oral sex in a classroom closet years earlier. To this day, Staten has denied the allegation, and police never arrested him or recommended charges, citing insufficient evidence. But Staten quit in 2013, weeks before a Child Protective Services investigation found he had engaged in sex abuse and ordered his name to be added to a child abuse registry that would prevent him from teaching. But a NEWS4 I-Team investigation revealed Staten kept on teaching in Lanham, Maryland, at Thomas Johnson Middle School until 2017, where Dwight Francis's daughter was one of his students.
It gives me a feeling in my stomach as if, do I need to talk to my child in a certain type of way to try and find out if anything may or may not have happened.
Staten was able to keep teaching in part because of a loophole in Virginia law. It allows teachers with a founded case of child abuse to keep their licenses and remain off the child abuse registry if they appeal their cases to state officials in Richmond. Staten's appeal lasted 2 years, preventing Virginia from raising red flags to alert Prince George's schools they'd hired a man facing accusations of sex assault.
I found your report very disturbing. On multiple levels. I think school systems need full information before they hire somebody.
State Senator Barbara Favola, who chairs a state legislative commission on child safety, has formally asked Virginia's Department of Social Services to consider changes to their regulations to tighten the restrictions on teachers who are appealing cases of sex assault on kids.
This is worthy of our attention, and we have to come up with a way that protects our children, as well as protects the rights of the accused.
But that loophole wasn't the only reason Staten was able to keep teaching. The I-Team's investigation found Arlington County Human Services, the Child Protective Service Agency, failed to tell the school district or the State Department of Education what it found, preventing Staten's teaching license from being revoked even after his appeal was rejected.
Ileana Gill counsels abuse victims.
That's a mistake that's hardly comprehensible. Because there's been so much work done to try to make sure all the procedures are in place. People have spent decades trying to get everything in place so that this kind of mistake can't happen.
Because of our investigation, the Virginia Department of Education has now issued a memo to the nearly 100 Child Protective Service agencies statewide, alerting them to check their case files to avoid such mistakes and report any findings of misconduct by teachers. It says without such notice, an individual who's the subject of a founded case of child abuse or neglect may continue to hold a teaching license in Virginia and possibly secure licensure and/or employment in another state.
That local agency is required by law to notify the state superintendent.
To get that teacher's license revoked.
Correct.
Sevlin Staten declined to be interviewed. He resigned his position in Prince George's County in January after the mistake made in his case was discovered by school officials in Arlington. His Virginia teaching license was finally revoked in May of this year in a hearing on whether to change these Virginia state regulations because of his case scheduled for next month. Leon Doreen, we will be there.
Every time you take a look at this, it just makes you go, how? How could this keep happening?
There are different layers of responsibility, and everybody's got to fulfill their responsibility.
Students in Fairfax County schools are safer after a NEWS4 I-Team investigation.
Yeah, the school district is promising to improve how it handles cases of teachers accused of sexual misconduct with students. As Scott McFarland reports tonight, the new superintendent says bad teachers will no longer slip through the cracks.
The NEWS4 I-Team found at least 4 Fairfax County teachers slipped through the cracks since 2004. All admitted sexual misconduct with kids, all quit their jobs, including a West Potomac High teacher accused of sexually touching this man's daughter.
She had the least of the problems with the guy. Her friends got it worse.
But we found all 4 teachers managed to keep their teaching licenses intact for years. One of them, Brad Norton, managed to find a new teaching job in Maryland, where he pleaded guilty to assaulting yet another student.
What we were doing around teacher licensure was not working.
In each case, we found the school district failed for years to file the proper paperwork with state regulators to ensure those teachers had their licenses revoked. Fairfax County's new school superintendent, Scott Brabrand, says that won't happen again.
We really revamped our policies. We're being far more proactive about licensure revocation.
And Brabrand says any teacher who cancels his or her license in Fairfax because of allegations of misconduct will now be red flagged if other schools call for a reference.
Even a teacher who voluntarily submits their license, we're going to be giving a no recommendation for future employment to other school systems. So we're taking a clearer stand.
Virginia approved a new law after the I-Team revealed the problems in Fairfax last year, requiring all school districts throughout the Commonwealth more promptly report suspected teacher misconduct to state regulators.
I think your work really helped shine a light on something that needed to be looked at.
Calls for change throughout Virginia because of a NEWS4 I-Team investigation, including stiffer laws to protect children from sexual predators in their own schools. Scott McFarland has the latest on this from the Capitol in Richmond.
Virginia state leaders now considering new law to more easily remove teachers accused of sexually abusing their students. A formal legislative hearing here in Richmond because of what the NEWS4 I-Team found last month, when we revealed a former Arlington County elementary school teacher was found to have engaged in sex abuse against a 3rd grade girl by Child Protective Services. He's always denied the accusation, wasn't arrested or criminally charged, and appealed his case for years. He lost the appeal, but we found during those years he managed to find a new teaching job in Prince George's County because Virginia allows teachers found to have engaged in sex abuse by Child Protective Services to keep their teaching licenses and keep teaching kids while they appeal.
Right now, apparently, the alleged perpetrator can just continue to ask for a delay, and nothing ever comes to closure.
At a state legislative hearing here, legislators said loopholes like that are dangerous and should be changed.
We're giving you a license to practice in our state, and we should have certain standards, and the first standard should be the health and safety of the children you're going to be with.
The proposed new laws will be introduced in January when the legislature returns here to Richmond. Scott McFarland, NEWS4 I-Team.
Our NEWS4 I-Team is working for you to better protect our children. Earlier this month, the I-Team found D.C. does not have the power to revoke a teacher's license, even a teacher who admits to sexual misconduct with students.
Now, Scott McFarland reports tonight D.C. officials say that fixes will be made, but they still aren't certain by when.
The classroom to prison. Giovanni Pena's arrest shocked D.C.'s Oyster Adams School and parents like Dion Bell.
It's like your heart stops beating. It's like it takes your breath away.
Pena pleaded guilty to sexually abusing a student in her son's class. But a NEWS4 I-Team investigation found D.C. education officials never revoked Pena's teaching license, or the licenses of John Solano or Charles Young, both of whom also admitted sex abuse while teaching in D.C. public schools. Those licenses were allowed to simply expire. Why does that matter? Because that means D.C. never forwarded their names to the national database that flags teachers who've lost licenses for misconduct, a database all other states use to prevent a bad apple from getting near kids again.
The national database was set up for a really good reason, and that's to protect children.
Safety experts, including child abuse therapist Ileana Gill, call what we found a major failure by D.C.
We've got to have ways to make sure that there are red flags when they need to be there.
Our investigation found D.C. is trying to, but hasn't even finished its policies for revoking teacher licenses, even though every other state, including Maryland and Virginia, did so years ago or decades ago. D.C.'s Office of State Superintendent of Education tells us it's trying to finish those policies, but might not until 2018 or 2019.
Hopefully we can get it done quickly and make sure that students in the district are covered.
D.C. Council Education Chairman David Grasso tells the I-Team he will meet formally with OSSI, the state superintendent of education, to talk about whether revocation policies can be finished sooner.
It sounds like we've been bogged down a little bit in the bureaucracy of the program and not really moving towards a real proactive solution to it. So let's get this done and get it done quickly.
Mayor Muriel Bowser's deputy mayor for education tells us handbooks with the new revocation policies will be ready within months. We wanted to talk to the mayor about the timing of these fixes, but her staff told us she wasn't available to do so.
Scott with Channel 4.
When we did catch up with Mayor Bowser, she confirmed regulations are in the works.
We operate a fantastic school district.
Shouldn't this have been done years ago, like it was in other states?
I can't talk about years ago. I'm the mayor now, and our OSSI will make sure that we have the most robust regulations that our district requires.
Should it happen sooner than 2019?
I've answered your questions, and you're not going to chase me. Thank you.
The team has learned at least 2 D.C. charter schools have taken some matters into their own hands here and have asked for information to enroll in that national database of teacher misconduct and to do it by themselves. That would allow them to search the backgrounds and license revocations of all their prospective hires. Some movement. We're just waiting to see if the rest of the district moves and when.
I hope you told the mayor we will chase her if we have to.
We ask
if
the
we have
questions.
to get an answer to these kinds of things, we will do the chasing.
We have to ask the questions.
There you go.